my friends, and welcome to the Liz Speaks podcast. My name is Liz Speakman, and I'm so happy that you're here with us today. The purpose of this podcast is to provide information about what's happening locally and then opportunities or suggestions for civic engagement. We're starting a new series of ballot questions. So for this intro, I'm going to give a little bit of context about what a ballot question is and how it gets to be on the ballot. And then you'll hear a series of interviews about some of the questions that you'll see on the ballot on November 3rd. So as I was learning more about the ballot questions, I realized it's quite complicated. So I'm going to try to simplify this as best I can. So there's a few ways that a bill can become a law. And I'm going to give a quick description of how that can happen through the State House, and then make the connection to how a ballot question can become a law. So in the State House, in the beginning of each session, which is 2 years, all the lawmakers, our state reps and our state senators, propose a lot of different bills, thousands. And so that's what's going to happen this coming January 2027. Thousands of bills are going to be proposed. And then over the next 2 years, they will go into committees. They will be decided whether they're favorable or not. And then the bill will either go to the floor for a vote, or it will just kind of be tabled and go off into the black hole. Basically what happens is each lawmaker will propose different bills about issues that they're concerned about, their constituents are concerned about. And then it would go to, if they get support, it would go to designated to a committee. If the committee decides this is a good bill, we want to support it, it gets voted out favorably. And that has to happen in the state House of Reps and the state Senate. If the bills come out favorably from each committee, there's a chance that then that bill can go to the floor for a vote. Who decides whether that bill goes to the floor for a vote? In the House, it's the House, the Speaker of the House. In the Senate, it's a Senate President. And so those roles hold a significant amount of power in whether a bill can even get a vote or not. And so out of all these thousands of bills that are proposed in the beginning of the session, not a ton of them end up going to the floor for a vote. If it does go to the floor for a vote, it has to be approved in both the House and the Senate. And then it goes to the governor's desk, and the governor can decide to either sign it or veto it. So by the time you get to the end of this 2-year session, you have, a decent amount of bills that have been voted favorably out of committee and then gone to the floor and been approved and then gone to the governor's desk for approval. What happens with many bills is they never see the light of day. They go to committee and they sort of die in committee. They never get to the floor for a vote. And so what a lot of activists or people who are interested in getting new laws passed may do is, instead of going through that process, or in addition to going through that process usually, they'll also try to get it on the ballot, which is also a very challenging, complicated process, as it should be. To become a law, I think it should be vetted quite a bit. So for folks who believe in something or oppose something, and they're trying to get it through the State House and to the governor, they may also start this ballot process. And how you do that is you have to have a petition. And so this past cycle, by November 19th, 2025, there had to be a certain amount of signatures on a petition. And when I tried to figure out how many signatures were needed, this is what I found. So in order to have a petition considered for a ballot initiative, the signatures must equal 3% of votes cast for governor in the most recent election, excluding blanks. So for this past petition in November, anyone who wanted to get something on the ballot had to get at least 74,574 signatures. Those all needed to be signed off on by the local clerk and then brought to the Secretary of State's office and certified there. If that all went through, the State House has an opportunity to pass this ballot initiative as a law and avoid it going through this whole rest of the process to become on the ballot. They can certainly do that. If they don't do that, then another round of signatures is needed. And that total needs to be 0.5% of votes cast for the last governor. And so that's what a lot of people have done for this round. And those signatures were due July 1st. And that number was 12,429. And those signatures were due to the Secretary of Commonwealth on July 1st. And the Secretary has a certain amount of time to be able to certify those. And so right now, we've got a handful of ballot questions that have been certified that are definitely going to be on the ballot on November 3rd. And a lot of people feel like if our state legislature passed bills more in more higher quantity, maybe we wouldn't have so many ballot questions. But it's another way to get a law passed, and we're really in a great opportunity now to be able to vet these ballot questions and see if they are something that we would support. So the first interview that we did, I was really interested in because it's about 62F, which I had never heard of before. But you're going to learn a lot, so we're going to nerd out on this episode, and I hope that you stick with it because it is really critical that we understand what this ballot question is and the potential implications that it could have for all of our public services across Massachusetts. And so we invited folks from MassBudget, who are experts in tax law, to be able to come and explain it to us in a way that we can understand, and help us be as informed as we can be about whether this ballot initiative on 62F is something that would be helpful for us to support in terms of our public services, or if we should oppose it in order to preserve the services that we have. So if you're interested in nerding out with me and learning all about this tax law and how it could impact us and how you want to vote on November 3rd, stick with us, and you're going to learn a lot. Thanks so much. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Liz Speaks podcast. This podcast is meant to help provide information to community members so that they can understand what's happening in the local community, particularly around local politics. And each session, each episode, we really give people an opportunity to figure out how they might plug in. So if there's something in this episode that you find interesting and engaging, and you want to help out, we'll make sure that you have an opportunity at the end of this to learn how you can help. I'm really excited today. We're going to be talking about a ballot initiative, 62F, the tax cap. When I first started learning about this, I was very confused. So we are going to make sure it's as simple as possible so you have an understanding of which way you might want to vote. So today we're interviewing Greg and Viviana from MassBudget, and we're really excited that you're here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So tell me, in the most simple terms possible, what is this ballot initiative?
You go, Greg.
Yeah. So with 62F, it actually refers to the Chapter 62, Section F of the Massachusetts General Laws. And so it is so complicated that even the legislators couldn't figure out how to name it other than just a section that it's included in.
Okay.
And so simply it is a cap on the amount of revenue that the state can raise during a given year based on prior year's tax collections. And so when we're thinking about what money can be used in our state is that public investments in Massachusetts are a choice. And if we choose to have a cap on that revenue, we are choosing to not invest in critical infrastructure and programs that our residents need all across the state.
So when I first read this, I was confused about the cap because I thought, well, if we have a cap, then but we raise all this money from taxes and there's a cap, where does the money go? What happens to that money? So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so the cap, so again, it's all about choices. And so if we're choosing to have a cap, then taxpayers will be getting rebates from this as well. But the people that are backing this initiative are the people that were against the fair share surtax passed in 2022, and so what is more normally called the millionaire's tax.
Yep.
And so the majority of those rebates are actually going to go back to the millionaires and billionaires of our state and the highest incomes, where the people that other taxpayers are getting nominal amounts back, but it comes at the expense of all the critical programs that our state needs, especially as federal funding is being cut as well.
Right, yeah, I know the state is stepping in to help out with where some federal funding has been cut. For me, I work at the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center, and we got significant cuts across all the domestic violence, sexual assault programs through the federal government, and we just found out last week that the state is stepping in to make up that difference. And so for my organization, our sister organizations, the state is making a huge difference. But if the state didn't have this tax revenue coming in, the state wouldn't be able to make up the difference of what's happening in the federal government, if I'm understanding
Correct.
it correctly.
Yeah. So a couple of things with 62F. So let's just remember just quickly, because this just happened a week ago. There were 2 ballot questions.
Right.
And both ballot questions that are intended to reduce how much revenue the state is going to make to actually invest in public goods and services and infrastructure. These 2 ballot questions have been backed by those that were against the fair share tax that was passed in 2022. So the first ballot question that was to reduce from 5 to 4% the income tax paid by taxpayers in Massachusetts, that would have cost Massachusetts about $5 billion in revenue. So that ballot question was eliminated through a decision of the Massachusetts Supreme Court. As a result of the way that the Attorney General had drafted the question. It was inaccurate, and it excluded from the summary of the question a significant portion of taxes that were going to be cut. So that was one thing. So the Supreme Court decided on that one. Now we still have in our hands another measure that is still being backed up by those that are still upset at the fact that voters decided to make Massachusetts' tax system more fair. So those that make more money are going to contribute more to the public good. Right. So the fair share has generated close to $9 billion since 2022. And we can talk about all of the extraordinary investments. So what this ballot measure is proposing to voters is to establish a cap in how much money the state can raise in terms of revenue through taxes. And the worst part of this is that it includes the fair share.
Oh, well, you know how I feel about
that. So all of the money that we have been able to bring in will be part of this equation that it's going to cap the amount. So the amount of money we have invested in public education and public transportation, we are going to walk backwards. So that is the part that it's concerning to us. Because indeed, if we exceed the cap that is established, residents are going to get a rebate. Taxpayers are going to get a rebate. But that is going to be at the cost of public services. And public investments in infrastructure. So if I get some money back, it's not going to be the same as just fixing a bridge that I need to be able to get from Worcester to Boston, and that is not going to take me 2 hours. These are the kind of things that when it's not just this, it is the repercussion, and it is a political agenda. So we need to just clarify that this is. We're just seeing what it's coming.
Well, and you know I have strong feelings about this because I worked on the Fair Share Amendment. I took a leave from my job with the City of Cambridge for 6 months and worked full-time on Fair Share. And I remember I knocked over 2,000 doors. And I remember that a lot of people had concerns about raising this tax on people. And what really kind of helped people vote yes partly was when I explained to them, if you make up to $1 million, you will not see any changes in your taxes.
Yep.
If you make $1.1 million, then you will see that additional tax on that extra dollar. Mm-hmm. It's not going to go back and have tax increase on your whole salary. And so most of us do not make $1 million in a year. And so it's for the people who make over $1 million a year who are contributing. And I remember knocking on doors and telling people I think we estimated $1 to $2 billion. Yeah. And now we're hearing $9 billion since it started, and seeing the improvements in our transportation and in our schools and what an impact that has been. But I remember there was a lot of opposition and a lot of money poured into the opposition by a handful of billionaires who didn't want to see this tax, even though, I'm sure 5 generations from them would still not have to work, right? Mm-hmm. So still trying to preserve that money, even though they didn't need it. And for me, I would say, if I got a rebate of $20 or $100 or whatever it is, I would rather see that going to our bridges, to our public schools, to our public services, because it's going to make that much more of a difference than it is for me and my family to have that little bit of extra money. And so I didn't realize until you were saying that this ballot question is a reaction to the overwhelming support of fair share and the creative ways that the billionaires are trying to undermine that success that we've had in a way that confuses people, right? Yeah. Fair share was real clear cut. We were able to really explain it on the doors very clearly, and people were on board. Yeah. This is more complicated, and I'm wondering if that's partly by design.
Oh yes, it's absolutely complicated, because the people that are proponents of this ballot initiative, they're just using a misleading message that tax rebates are great. And so everyone can get that, but we are trying to explain that that is only a small piece of what this ballot initiative would do and the consequences that it would have. Yeah. And so it's on the proponents of this ballot initiative to explain the complexity and be as truthful and transparent with the impact of what a yes vote would be.
So, yes, everything that you have said. I will add to that so a couple of things. One is explaining the complexity of a tax code. Another thing is being truthful with the message. So I'm going to go back to the way that they were describing how the cut in the income tax was going to benefit everybody. Mm-hmm. And their argument was that the average taxpayer was going to get between $1,200 and $1,300 back. That is not true, because it is proportional to the amount of money that you pay in your taxes. Right. So we have close to 26% of Massachusetts residents, Massachusetts households, make less than $50,000 a year in household income. Yeah. So that portion of those taxpayers that have a lower income, we're going to get a tax, a tax break of about $500. Now, those that make the 1% of the high income households in Massachusetts, we're going to get about $32,000 in a tax cut. Yeah. So messaging, and I have to always quote Phineas Baxendale, our director of research, that he says, well, if Elon Musk walks into Gillette Stadium, the average income of everybody has dramatically increased. Sure, right. So this is the way that they are so that's one thing. The other thing is that those that were going to get about $500 in a tax cut were going to lose extraordinary services, like vouchers for childcare services, like what are we going to do in terms of support for SNAP benefits and healthcare services? Because if you lose extraordinary amounts of money and the state is not proposing new progressive revenue lines, the alternative is cutting. Now, let's put this, Liz, in a national context. So the OBBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, passed by Congress in 2020, just last year, 2024. 2025. This is all blurry because for emotional and psychological reasons. So that bill gives $1 trillion in tax cuts to the millionaires and higher, like the multi-billion-dollar corporations and individuals. And that tax cut is also creating another public policy, which is cutting about $1 trillion in Medicaid and SNAP benefits. So,
can you just, for people who don't know what SNAP benefits are?
That is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program.
So food
stamps, yes. So once the richest, wealthiest corporations and individuals are going to get all of these tax cuts at the federal level, at the risk of our most vulnerable populations losing access to sustainable food and health care, if Massachusetts embraces these tax cuts that are going to really benefit those that have already benefited from the OBBBA, the income inequality, it's going to broaden. And our most vulnerable populations are going to suffer more by not having access to food and health care and other services. So as it is, with the new requirements for eligibility for SNAP benefits and Medicaid, the state is projecting about a $3.5 billion loss in federal revenue. So imagine if we are going to cap how much the state can collect in revenue, in addition to those federal revenue losses, the state is going to be in a critical financial condition. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me just, just so I understand. So there's already this 62F law that
it's already on the books.
exists, creates a cap. So what is the ballot initiative doing that's different than 62?
So it does two things. One, it creates an even more restrictive cap. And so the maximum amount of revenue that the state can collect would actually be restricted even further.
Okay, so it would be lower.
It lowers, and lowers the threshold. And it now adds in the fair share dollars that are collected, because currently any of the fair share revenue, because that's not meant for just day-to-day spending, it's meant for additional investments. That money is now going to be counted in because the people paying that tax want their money back.
So right now, there's, just to be very simple, there's two buckets. There's a bucket of fair share money that is here.
Completely separate.
That's separate, that can only go to education and transportation. And I will say, a lot of people on the door said to me, I don't trust that that's what's going to happen, right? I don't know if I want to vote for this because they're going to make these deals and it's going to end up. But I think we have seen it really is going to public education, transportation.
Yes, it is.
So we have a little more faith in government. So there's this bucket.
And we are the first ones at MassBudget to call it out if that's not happening.
So we'll know.
We'll
have you on here to tell us about it.
If that doesn't happen, and we could talk about that, but
All right. So we'll take that as a win for now. But we'll keep an eye on that. So there's that bucket. And then there's another bucket of revenue that's coming into the state that helps pay for, all the other sort of general things that the state covers. And that bucket has a cap on it.
Yes, already.
The fair share does not have a cap on it.
No, it doesn't.
And so this bucket of regular revenue has has a cap already.
Yeah.
And so what they're trying to do is combine these two buckets.
Yes.
So now they have all this billions of dollars of fair share money that's counting
And
lower.
the cap.
Okay.
So this 62F has only been triggered twice since it started and was on the books since 1986.
Okay.
And the most recent time was in 2022.
Okay.
And that was through a wide variety of factors coming out of the pandemic.
Right. All the
a lot
money.
of federal benefits that came through. And the other one of that was decades ago, the last time that it was addressed. So the cap is right now high enough where it is triggered not as often, but it's still just that it's on the books at all, we take issue with. And our internal modeling is showing that with this lowered cap and combining the fair share dollars, it's going to be triggered every few years. And so that's what our internal modeling is currently showing.
Okay.
And that is going to restrict the state from doing any type of long-term planning.
Right, because then they won't have the same budget projections that they would have otherwise.
Yeah. And Liz, so I meet regularly with legislators because part of our job is advocating for progressive revenue and also for investments in the public good. And almost every time that I meet with a legislator, and this is it's and I acknowledge that they are right, is we don't have enough money to pay for everything that is needed.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
So this is why the advocacy world, and you have so many multiple coalitions that are organizing policy issues, housing, public education, higher education, food. We are constantly advocating. We have competition in terms of the interests. The fair share has provided legislators with the ability to, and the funds, to respond to those specific demands. So the fair share has paid for the Student Opportunity Act in the last year, which is additional funding for school districts that have extraordinary need because their communities, the communities of these school districts serve underserved and underrepresented populations and low-income kids. It's also paying for free meals across the state. In addition to that, it's paying for free community college. So that's an engine of workforce development that the corporations that are pushing for the reduction in income tax and the reduction in the cap of how much the state, they are benefiting from this public education of a competitive, high-skilled, quality workforce. So when I think about, corporations, businesses, they need trained workforce. They need good public schools. They need their employees to be able to have affordable housing. They need their workers to be able to get home in public transportation that now in the regional transit authorities is free due to the fair share. So the amount of money that is benefiting the workers across the state that by default is benefiting all of these corporations, it makes absolutely no sense that you want the state to invest less in public goods. It's counterintuitive.
Yep. Yeah. So even if you don't agree with the premise that we should be, taking care of our most vulnerable, it doesn't make sense from a resource perspective, from just like a ability to run a successful corporation.
Or in making our state competitive
right.
as well. And so we know that a lot of the corporations right now and the Healy administration, they are really working on making sure our state is competitive. Viviana sits on the Competitiveness Council. And so how are we not going to be a competitive state if we're not investing in our children, our workforce, and the most vulnerable populations?
Right.
How are we going to keep people in our state? Because we have seen the data shows that the people that are leaving our state are not the 1%ers.
I heard about that too.
Yeah. And so,
the millionaires and the billionaires are going to leave Massachusetts.
It's a common myth. And there's IRS data that our team has analyzed and has published reports on showing that the majority of people leaving our state are households that make under $200,000 a year, and that is because the state is unaffordable for individuals and families.
Right.
And so if we look at the cost of daycare and childcare,
you have to get started.
As someone who has
he's gonna get a pay raise. He's gonna get a pay raise in a couple of years.
2 kids in daycare, I understand.
Yes. Totally.
Same. But unfortunate enough to have a job that allows me to afford it, but knowing that so many people don't, and that is going to continue making our state less competitive.
Right. Yep. So let me back up. I should have asked you this in the beginning, but what is MassBudget?
You can go first.
I can go first. So MassBudget is a rigorous research, targeted policy analysis, and strategic advocacy center.
Okay.
So we do research on the state budget. Mm-hmm. So we are constantly looking at how much the state is bringing in and where the state is investing the money. We also work directly with coalitions and grassroots organizations and collective bargaining units, the unions, and we, together with these organizations, we advocate for public policies that benefit those low and mid-income families and the communities of color that have been historically excluded from the decision-making table. So we also do advocacy. So we want to make sure that our legislators have the information that they need to make decisions and to do analysis. So we are, like in the last couple of years, we have expanded our work in making sure that we can reach average citizens and residents. Yeah. And we are doing these policy talks in which we are inviting the public to join us and listen to, for example, how much money has the cannabis industry brought in and where is that money being invested? And is that money being used also to address issues of inequity in the communities of color that were unfairly or over-criminalized during the war on drugs years. So we are a convener also of different interests, but we are unapologetically progressive. We strongly believe that the state needs to invest in its most vulnerable population, but we do it from a scientific perspective. We look at data, we analyze the data, and we convey the message. So, did I miss something?
Well, I was just saying, we're going to be 40 years old next year.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, that is true.
And we were actually founded because of the anti-tax movement in the 1980s, which the 62F was founded. So we were founded the year after 62F went into effect.
Wow.
And so that was, so we have history with this particular ballot initiative because it is the whole reason why MassBudget was founded.
You got some baggage.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
We have a point to continue to prove that we've been spending 40 years proving.
Yeah. So we work in, for example, the Student Opportunity Act. We did a lot of work in terms of research. For the fair share, we were the first ones that estimated that it was going to bring at least $2 billion. And like somebody said to me the other day, well, you won The Price is Right because you were the closest. But even though it has brought in much more money.
Yeah, and we're paid family medical leave. We provided all the research for that. And earned sick time in Massachusetts as well.
Yes, yeah. We advocate for financial support for affordable childcare, so the vouchers for the parents, but also the grants for the daycare providers. We advocate for vouchers for homes and rent vouchers. We strongly believe that an inclusive, participatory, and funded democracy is the way to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How long have you each been there?
Yeah, so in a few weeks will be my 5 years at
MassBudget.
Yeah. So I've been running the business side of the organization, including our communications work as well. And so I've been able to see all of the work and being able to bring in all the team to be able to continue doing all this great analysis.
Great.
I'll be in 1 month today will be my 2nd anniversary.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's so great.
But he's also the wind beneath my wings. He's like we work together really closely, and yeah, because you know, like we are, yes, and we have an amazing team of researchers and analysts and advocacy. So, you know, we are lucky that we can come here and represent their work.
Yeah.
But they are the ones that, you know, they are the experts in taxation and revenue and K-12, public policy analysis and housing. And, so it's, childcare.
Today alone, we had 2 staff that were testifying in front of either the House and the Senate today, their Joint Commission on Poverty.
Oh, okay.
So there's a big poverty bill coming out, and so we just provided in-person testimony today. So we have staff that are, we are a statewide organization.
That's great.
Yes.
Well, I remember when I was working on Fair Share, and they asked me to do a couple debates, and I don't know a lot about tax law. I'm a social worker, but the information from MassBudget was so helpful for me to feel like I knew what I was talking about. The parts that I knew, I didn't talk about things that I didn't know, but it was so clear that this was based on the data, but also translated in a way that made it simple enough that I could talk about it in a way that I understood and I knew other people would understand. And so I think that the value of MassBudget and not only doing that research and understanding all of the data, but to be able to translate it in a way that the average person can understand and make an informed decision. Because even if someone says, you know what, I get it, but I still want this tax cap to be lowered and I want fair share to be included, you're still making an informed decision.
Yes.
You know, and like I may not agree with that, but the idea is that you are informed. You're not getting misinformation and making a decision based on something that's not actually going to happen. And so I think that's where we have a healthy, strong democracy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we also work with partner organizations across the United States. So we constantly look at policies that have been enacted in other states. In the case of the fair share, MassBudget is they come to us to ask us for feedback. We have so many states that are now moving into enacting fair share. So Washington State and Hawaii and we were testifying in Rhode Island and we testified in Vermont. So we are serving also as experts about the implementation of the fair share in Massachusetts and how that, in other states they have passed legislation. In the case of Massachusetts, it was a ballot question, but other states are moving through legislation.
Sure.
So we work with partners because we also want to look at what has happened in other states, how messaging has been conveyed. And we are very proud of the partnerships we have across the United States, but also with national institutes like the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, ITEP, and the Center for Budget Policies and Priorities that is at the national level. So we are in coordination with other states.
That's great.
And yeah, so
let me ask you, with the ballot question, what is your sort of, if people are listening and they say, you know what, I want to tell my family, my friends about this ballot question, how do you help people explain it in a way that is simple and clear and concise? What is your
First of all, it's a bad idea. That is where we're starting with.
So that was my next question.
Yes.
Are you asking people to vote yes or no? Because I know
we are not in favor of having a cap.
Okay.
Yes.
So the ballot question is suggesting the cap and suggesting including, and so you are suggesting people vote no.
No.
Correct.
Yes.
So no on whatever the
Whatever
ballot
number.
number.
Yeah. So they're not officially on the ballot yet. They're still in signature collection phases, and so they don't have an official ballot number yet.
Okay.
So we can't just
But
say
no on
the
tax cap.
No on the tax cap.
Okay.
And first of all, like I said, it's a bad idea. Second of all, it is still giving disproportionately a lot of money back to the wealthy people who should be paying their share in Massachusetts to invest in public education, investing in public transportation, investing in, do we want people to have access to food stamps? We want people to have access to Medicaid. And so if we're going to limit the amount that the state can raise in revenue, we're limiting any of the investments that people have made a choice for the state to be able to invest in.
So one thing I've heard from, not personally, because I don't talk to billionaires, but from rich people is that they want to be able to choose where their money goes, that they are, philanthropists like Rob Hale is very active in Quincy, and we now have the Hale Family YMCA, and that they are very willing to give. They just want to choose where that goes. So curious about your thoughts on that.
So first of all, and there's a lot of data out there that we've been able to show too, is that people that want to give, that money doesn't have to stay in Massachusetts. And so what we're guaranteeing is that the money that that we're generating through taxes actually stay in Massachusetts. Because people that want to donate, they might donate to national political parties. The Supreme Court yesterday lifted the cap on how much money can go into politics still. And so we can't guarantee that the money, if people haven't been giving their dollars to Massachusetts already, what is it going to mean that if they're actually going to do that going forward? And so we need to make sure we guarantee that money is being invested in Massachusetts.
Yeah. So, yes, to everything that Greg said. So when people make donations to charity or foundations, it is deducted from taxes. So, if somebody went to school in New Jersey, they went to Princeton, or they went to Stanford, and they make a $10 million contribution, that will benefit people in other states. So the way that we can make sure that the investments and that that are made is through paying our taxes. That's number one. Number two, I always think that we need to ask ourselves about the effectiveness of a state that their citizens and residents have to rely and depend on a food pantry to have access to food. And food pantries are funded by donations and, of course, state contributions, because these are nonprofits, and the state provides financial support to the third sector, which is the nonprofit sector. But what the nonprofit sector does, and it does it really well, it is to make up for what the state is not doing. So that is one of the things that we need to think about. That when the state has limited resources and the state decides that it's better to make a contribution of $150,000 in a grant to a nonprofit that provides a needed service to the community, if the state will assume that responsibility, it could be a lot more expensive. But when, wealthy and non-wealthy people make contributions to food pantries, to rape crisis centers, to foundations that provide support and scholarships to, college students, for example, is because the level of poverty is such that even with governmental support, we still have sectors of the population that cannot afford food. That we have people that are going to college and cannot afford their books. Or and this is something that, that we have seen, and I come from the higher education sector, that, when a student, their car breaks down, that can be the reason why they drop out of college, because either they fix their car, or they pay their rent, or they pay their tuition. So these juggling of personal decisions, it's like I think that and I will also add that the more you cut revenue, the least resources politicians have to provide services to the communities, towns, and cities that they represent.
Right.
So to deliver back to their constituents the least resources they have, the worse it is for them. Right. So, like, we've heard some politicians that are not happy with these proposals, the income tax cut and this 62F. So I think it's important to just think about in the more like an ecosystem of services that the state provides, that the federal government funds, and what the nonprofit sector is doing in these communities. And I will tell you that if there is less money in the state, the first ones that are not going to get support are the nonprofits.
Well, as someone who runs a nonprofit,
that is a choice. These are through earmarks.
Right.
These are through, and you know that when there is not a lot of money,
Yeah.
the earmarks are the ones that I'm like, oh, hold on, let me just add that we cannot until I see the next quarter how much money are we bringing in.
Yeah.
So nonprofits, even though, let's say, a rich person decides to provide to their community foundation because they know where it is invested. Yeah, just look at the budget.
Yeah.
Because when you pay your taxes and I pay my taxes, we can also see where the money is invested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also that to counter the points of, one, people that are wealthy should be giving their money anyways, and so whether or not. But it's also, if we just leave it to the wealthy people to decide where to spend their resources, we're continuing to let the wealthiest make the choices of what's valuable and what's not. And so in that, a lot of the times, those individuals are not making the best choices or don't understand what the biggest needs are.
Yeah. And may not be making the decisions based on the historic oppression that a lot of communities have experienced.
And where did they get their wealth in the first place?
Well, that's a whole other, I think we've got a whole other podcast planned for that. Yes, we talk to our kids about, anyway, I won't go on that tangent. But yes,
not today.
Yes, not today,
but
for
that's
another
just
day.
a continue, there's, we can go so much further into why we shouldn't allow that to continue happening.
Yeah, and for me, I think we're here at Quincy Access TV that is supported by the City of Quincy. We are connected right now to the library that is supported by the City of Quincy and gets some state funding. And so for me, I often think about these resources that are funded by the state and the city that our philanthropists may not decide to invest in. And so what does that then mean? If they can make those decisions based on their values and their perspective and their lived experience, what does that mean for the sort of general public services that we all access and need at different points in our life? Elder services, pre-K, food stamps. The fact that Fair Share provides free meals for kids across the state makes me want to cry. I'm so proud of that. But, someone may decide, well, I don't think that's where we should invest. And if one person's deciding that, then what does that mean about our ability to provide across the board equitable care, for everybody? And so personally, I take issue with someone with money saying, I'd rather pay it. I'd rather choose my philanthropy than pay more in taxes, because I believe in the public good and that we all have a responsibility to do our part, whether it's by paying taxes or volunteering or supporting a food pantry, that we all have some kind of responsibility to our community, and not just myself as number one, and how do I sort of get as much as I possibly can. And so for me, it's also a moral issue.
Well, I think this is great when you say, it's a moral choice. So budgets are moral documents.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
This is the first thing that we say in MassBudget is like, you want to see our values, the state of Massachusetts value, look at where the money is being invested.
That's right.
We have a federal administration that has clearly shown what are their values. The values are the private accumulation of capital in the hands of the few at the expense of public goods. So, for example, public television, public radio.
Right.
So the defunding of the public good, it is the values that they are showing. Defunding the supplemental nutrition assistance program,
Right.
defunding Medicaid,
Yeah.
defunding parks and recreations, defunding libraries,
Right. Getting rid of the
defunding
Department of
research.
Education.
Yeah, defunding research.
Yeah, I know.
Defunding
Science.
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
So it is very clear
Yeah.
what it is the value statement
Right.
that the federal government is putting forward.
Right.
What we want to make sure is that Massachusetts doesn't reproduce that.
Yep. Absolutely.
And these ballot measures are going in that direction.
right. It's making a value statement.
It is making
Right.
a value
It's,
statement.
everything is a choice.
Yep.
Yes.
And
And
there-
so, yeah, the value statement of reducing the cap and bringing in fair share and finding creative, crafty ways to pay less in taxes is a value statement about, what these people and corporations believe their role is in society, in government, in the public good. So I'm going to vote no. And of course, people will vote how they vote, and as long as they're informed, I support that. I love that. But if folks are listening to this and they're thinking, I supported fair share, I voted yes on one, and I'm so happy that we are seeing the results of that in our public education and our transportation, and I don't want that taken away from us, what can they do to get involved?
Yeah, first of all, supporting MassBudget and the work that we're doing. It's always
You take
the
donations?
plug. We
Yes,
do take donations.
we do.
Yeah, massbudget.org.
Yes.
So you can see all the research that we've done. We've done public testimony to the legislature on this. We've produced a lot of research over the years on this as well, and then working with their grassroots organizations, calling up their legislators to talk about this, because we need to make sure that everyone understands that this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Talking to their family, talking to their neighbors, talking to their communities about it.
Yeah. So just knowing that at the end of the day, the positive impact that it's going to have in the 99% of Massachusetts residents is pretty much zero. So
It'll benefit the top 1%.
exactly. So it's like they're not thinking about you.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
not thinking about teachers or children or
Yeah.
even college professors. It's
Right.
like it's who is serving this measure. So if it's not you, like in your community and in the majority of the people that I think that it is an easy choice to make. So go into our website, join our mailing list. You will be invited to join our policy talks, and you could be informed, because for example, we did one about what was the whole proposal of the governor's budget this year. So if you want to know really early in January or February what it is in that budget proposal, just come and listen to us. And
They're free. Yep.
Yeah, they are free. They are through Zoom, and we always bring organizers and collective directors, and we also have elected officials. So we want to give them a seat at the table. And we have researchers and activists and coalition leaders and also elected officials discussing, the proposals of the budget. So just read our stuff. I think that get in our mailing list and make a donation to MassBudget.
And we're happy to come talk to anyone that wants to listen as well.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was going to say, I think some of our, I would say, I'm guessing we don't have any listeners that are in the top 1%, but we do have listeners who have their own community-based organizations or coalitions or groups that they kind of bring together, and so
we're happy to come talk to anyone and everyone who wants to hear it.
Great, excellent.
Yes.
And I've been doing a series of interviews with the district attorney candidates and telling people September 1 because it's a Democratic primary, but I'm switching gears now, and November.
Yes.
7th? No, what's the date of? Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only
Yeah.
one. November. Let's say November.
November.
So we want
First Tuesday.
the first Tuesday in November, whatever that is. So we want people to vote in November. Vote on September 1st for their primaries, and then
Yes.
go back and vote again in November. All the ballot questions are going to be on there.
Yes.
And I'm assuming there will probably be a website once this is more formal and
Yeah.
stuff. So keep an eye, get on the listserv for MassBudget, so then you can stay up to date on the
we're
ballot
active
initiative.
partners in the opposition to this. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Greg and Viviana,
Thank
so
you.
much for being
Thank
here. Really
you.
appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have you back for bigger conversations about why
Well-
billionaires shouldn't exist.
Yes.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.